When two people are genuinely meant to end up together, there's one thing that shows up almost every single time, no matter how different their lives look or how random the meeting seems. Most of us grow up believing destiny is supposed to feel soft right from the start, that it arrives as instant comfort, effortless love, a sense that everything has clicked into place the moment two people meet. We picture two strangers locking eyes, smiling, just knowing. But that's not really how it tends to work in practice. Real destiny tends to sneak in quietly and then turn everything upside down. It rarely brings peace first. What it brings first is disruption. When two people are truly meant for each other, life doesn't rush to put them together right away. More often, it does the opposite. It creates space between them. It pulls them apart, tests what they believe, and forces both of them to look at themselves honestly. It breaks down illusions they didn't even realize they were carrying. And none of this is cruelty. It's preparation. Because before two people who are meant for each other can actually come together in a lasting way, each of them usually has to go through some kind of change first. Here's the thing most people get wrong about destined love. They expect it to feel like instant joy, like two lives simply merging into something smooth and simple. But real destiny usually shows up by shaking things loose first. When two people are genuinely right for each other, the universe rarely hurries them into a relationship. It tends to separate them instead, dismantling false beliefs, challenging their expectations, reshaping who they are as individuals before anything gets to move forward. This pattern shows up again and again, almost without exception. And that's the one constant thing that seems to always happen. People often misunderstand what a truly destined connection actually feels like. They assume it should feel safe and easy from the very first conversation, like a shelter where nothing can hurt them. But that's rarely the starting point. Destined love usually doesn't begin with comfort. It begins with recognition. That's the real first sign of a deep, meaningful bond. Not calm, but recognition. You meet someone, and something inside you reacts before your conscious mind even has a chance to process what's happening. You might not feel relaxed, you might not feel secure, you might not even be sure about them yet, but you feel seen in a way that catches you off guard. It's as if they notice parts of you that you usually keep hidden, sometimes even from yourself. This can be disorienting because most of us expect love to feel soothing right out of the gate. Instead, a destined connection often feels uncomfortable at first, and that discomfort doesn't mean the person is wrong for you. Usually it means something closer to the opposite. It means they're reflecting back parts of yourself you've been avoiding, your fears, your unhealed wounds, your unfinished emotional business. They're not just seeing the polished version of you that you present to the world. They're seeing deeper layers, and that can feel genuinely threatening. That's exactly why these connections tend to feel intense rather than easy. They bring awareness before they bring closeness. It's also why the people who are meant to end up together rarely stay together right from the start. If two people are genuinely destined to build a future together, life tends to separate them early on, and this separation isn't random. There are usually specific reasons behind it. Maybe one of them is still carrying old emotional wounds. Maybe one is afraid to be vulnerable and let their guard down. Maybe one hasn't yet understood their own worth, or is loving from a place of fear rather than wholeness. Sometimes both people are still unfinished in their own ways, and unfinished people, even with the best intentions, can end up hurting each other badly. So life steps in and creates distance. It's essentially saying, not yet. It knows that if these two came together too soon, they'd end up damaging something that could have grown into real depth. As painful as the separation feels, it's built into the design. It isn't a punishment, it's preparation. When people who are meant for each other get separated, the pain tends to feel different from an ordinary breakup. It's not just sadness, it's disorientation. It feels like losing a sense of direction. You're not simply missing the other person. You feel like something inside you has gone missing too. That happens because destined connections aren't really rooted in ego. They're tied to growth. So when someone like that exits your life, it pushes you to look inward, to confront things you've been sidestepping for a long time. You start noticing your fear of being abandoned. You see how much you lean on other people for validation. You recognize the pattern of overgiving just to keep someone close. You become aware of how you dodge responsibility for your own emotional needs. None of these realizations feel good, but they're necessary. The pain isn't there to break you, it's there to wake you up. Destined love tends to change you quietly, even without any contact at all. Even when logic tells you to just move on, even in complete silence, something inside you keeps shifting. You become more self-aware. You start being more selective about who you let into your life. You get more honest about your own feelings and your own limits. Things you used to accept without question suddenly feel wrong. Situations you used to put up with now feel exhausting. People you used to chase no longer hold your interest the way they once did. You find yourself craving depth instead of surface-level attention, real connection instead of temporary comfort. A lot of the time, you won't even connect this growth back to that one person. But looking back, you'll realize the change started the moment they came into your life. They acted like a trigger. They set something in motion inside you. And this kind of bond doesn't create obsession. It creates reflection. You're not stuck endlessly thinking about them. You're thinking about your own life, your own patterns, the choices you've been making. You reflect on who you are and who you're becoming. You start asking yourself harder questions. Why do I love the way I do? Why am I afraid of real closeness? Why do I keep settling for less than I actually deserve? Slowly, these questions start reshaping you. Destined connections tend to work in ways that aren't obvious from the outside. The person might vanish from your day-to-day life completely, but their influence lingers. They change the way you look at relationships. They change the way you see yourself. They raise the bar, not just for what you'll accept from other people, but for how you treat yourself. They teach you that love isn't only about staying together. It's also about becoming whole as an individual. Over time, you notice you're no longer willing to repeat the same old patterns. You stop chasing people who can't meet you emotionally. You stop overlooking red flags just for the sake of feeling chosen. You start prioritizing peace, honesty, and genuine mutual effort. This kind of growth feels natural, even though it was born out of pain. And that's how you know the connection actually mattered. Destined love isn't loud, and it doesn't always stick around. Sometimes it arrives, transforms you, and then exits. Sometimes it leaves precisely so you can grow into the version of yourself capable of holding real love down the line. Whether the person ever comes back or not isn't always the real point. The purpose was always the transformation itself, the awakening, the redirection toward a more conscious, more grounded way of loving. When two people are genuinely meant for each other, their story rarely moves in a straight line. It winds through distance, confusion, and internal work. It demands growth before it allows for union. And that repeating pattern is the one thing that always seems to hold true. You find yourself thinking about them in moments when you're becoming more self-aware, during quiet internal shifts, during late nights when everything around you goes still and your own thoughts get louder than the world outside. You think of them during sudden emotional breakthroughs, moments where you understand something about yourself you'd never noticed before. And you're not thinking of them out of loneliness. You're not thinking of them because you're craving attention or validation. You think of them because some part of you understands that the connection carried real meaning, and that meaning hasn't fully settled yet. Your inner self recognizes unfinished lessons. It recognizes that something important got activated through that bond. This isn't weakness. It isn't obsession. It isn't attachment in the way people usually use that word. It's integration, your inner world trying to make sense of an experience, trying to absorb what it taught you, trying to understand exactly how it changed you. A destined connection doesn't just fade because time has passed. It stays present in quiet, subtle ways. It resurfaces when you grow. It resurfaces when you heal. It resurfaces when you outgrow an old version of who you used to be. That's because the connection was never only about romance to begin with. It was about transformation. A lot of people wonder why a bond like this can't just be replaced. They try anyway. They meet someone new. They step into new relationships. They keep themselves busy with conversations, activities, routines, anything to distract from what happened. They convince themselves that moving forward means forgetting. Sometimes they even believe they've pulled it off. Life looks normal on the surface again. They laugh, they socialize, they keep moving. But underneath all of that, something still feels unfinished. There's a quiet emptiness that doesn't fully go away, not because the new person is unkind or the new relationship lacks effort, but because it simply doesn't reach the same depth. It doesn't stir the same parts of the soul. A destined connection isn't competing with anyone else. It exists on an entirely different level. This kind of bond isn't built purely on attraction. It's not about excitement or easy chemistry. And it isn't about comfort or familiarity either. It's about evolution, about becoming more honest with yourself, about being pushed to confront parts of yourself you may have ignored for years. Destiny tends to work on each person separately before it ever brings them back together. Distance isn't a punishment. It's a classroom. While you're apart, life is shaping both of you in different ways, often through discomfort. One person starts learning boundaries, learning how to say no without drowning in guilt, learning how to stop giving more than they receive, learning that love was never supposed to require self-sacrifice, and that choosing themselves isn't selfish, it's necessary. The other person starts learning accountability, learning that silence can genuinely hurt someone, that avoiding emotions doesn't make them disappear, that actions carry consequences even when the intentions behind them were unclear, and that real connection comes with responsibility attached. One person learns self-respect. They stop treating uncertainty as evidence of love, stop waiting endlessly for clarity that never shows up, and start realizing that consistency actually matters. The other learns emotional courage, how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it, how to face vulnerability head-on instead of avoiding it. One learns how to stop chasing, recognizing that love can't be forced, and that pursuing someone who isn't ready only creates imbalance and pain. The other learns how to stop running, realizing that putting up distance doesn't actually protect them from loss. It just delays the growth they need. Both people are changing throughout all of this, even though neither one can see the whole picture yet. And that's intentional. If they could see everything too soon, the growth would stall out. The not knowing is exactly what creates room for real transformation. Before two destined people can find their way back to each other, certain illusions have to fall apart first. Life strips away false beliefs slowly and often painfully. Beliefs like love should never be difficult, or if someone really cared, they'd never leave, or love has to be earned through suffering, or another person exists to complete you. These ideas feel comforting on the surface, but they quietly damage real love. They breed dependence. They breed fear. They set up expectations no human being could ever actually meet. So life peels them away, not gently, but through silence, through distance, through disappointment, through the kind of moments that force you to sit alone with your own thoughts. Slowly, you start seeing yourself with more clarity. You start recognizing your patterns. You start understanding where you've abandoned yourself in the past. You learn that love was never meant to save you. You learn that another person can't fill the gaps you haven't healed on your own. You learn that real connection starts from a place of wholeness, not emptiness. There comes a point where something inside you finally shifts. You stop needing them. You stop watching for signs. You stop waiting for some message that's going to change everything. You stop hoping they'll come back, so you can finally feel complete. And when that moment arrives, it doesn't feel bitter. It feels peaceful. That's usually when destiny starts moving again, not because you tried harder, but because you finally let go of needing a specific outcome. Real love was never about dependence. It's a choice. When both people can stand on their own 2 feet, when love becomes something they want rather than something they need to survive, alignment starts to happen. If they do come back into your life, they come back different, more self-aware, capable of something deeper than before. And if they don't come back, the lesson still stands. You're simply no longer the same person who entered that connection in the first place. You're stronger, clearer, more grounded. You've absorbed what needed to be learned. That's the real truth about destined connections. They were never about ownership. They're about transformation. They enter your life not to remain in the same shape forever, but to wake you up, reshape you, and guide you toward a deeper sense of love, self-respect, and personal growth. When people who are truly meant for each other find their way back into each other's lives, it tends to feel quietly different, not loud, not dramatic, not demanding attention. It feels steady instead. Your body relaxes before your mind even understands why. There's less tension running through your thoughts, less fear about what could go wrong, and a lot less ego trying to prove something. Neither of you is performing anymore or guarding yourself the way you once did. What shows up instead is a kind of honesty that feels effortless, the kind that doesn't need explanations or defenses. It feels calmer because both of you have already been through your own chaos separately. It feels deeper because you've each looked inward and faced your own shadows. It feels clearer because the illusions have already been broken. It's not perfect, and it never claims to be, but it's aware. There's real intention in how words are chosen, how silence is respected, how boundaries are honored. No games, no hidden agendas, no need to test each other. There's no confusion about where you stand with one another. There's simply recognition, like meeting a familiar truth again, only this time carrying maturity and strength. And sometimes, even after all of that internal work, the two people don't end up finding their way back to each other. That's one of the harder truths to accept. Yet the destiny between them was still real. The connection wasn't imagined, it wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't wasted time. Not every destined connection is meant to last a lifetime. Some are only meant to exist long enough to change you. Some are meant to enter your life, shake up your inner world, and then leave once they've done what they came to do. Some connections show up specifically to break cycles that have been passed down through generations, the kind of relationship that exposes patterns you learned long before you ever had a say in the matter. They reveal where love got tangled up with sacrifice, where attachment got confused with safety, where silence got mistaken for peace. These connections force you to look at what you've been carrying that was never actually yours to begin with. They bring old, buried pain up to the surface so it can finally be healed instead of endlessly repeated. Other connections exist to teach you self-love, especially in seasons where you've been neglecting yourself. They mirror back exactly how you allow yourself to be treated. Through them, you start noticing where you shrink, where you settle, where you abandon your own needs just to keep someone close. They wake you up to the truth that love was never supposed to cost you your dignity, your voice, or your sense of self. These lessons hurt, but they're necessary. Without them, you might have kept giving too much while asking for too little. Some destined people awaken emotional depth you didn't know you still had, stirring feelings you'd numbed yourself to. They remind you that you're still capable of real care, vulnerability, and connection. Even if they eventually leave, they leave you more open than you were before. Others completely redirect your life path. Meeting them shifts the choices you make, the standards you hold yourself to, the direction your whole life ends up moving in. They don't stick around because staying was never their role. Their role was to prepare you for what comes next. None of that makes these connections meaningless. If anything, it makes them sacred. Sacred things don't have to be permanent to matter. They matter because of what they wake up inside you, not because of how long they stay. A lot of people wonder why destiny so often feels harsh before it ever feels gentle. Why it seems to take things away instead of giving them. The truth is, destiny was never in the business of protecting your comfort. Comfort tends to keep you stuck in familiar patterns, even the ones that are quietly hurting you. What destiny is actually protecting is your potential. It will let your heart break before it lets your spirit slowly fade away. It will remove people from your life before it lets you lose yourself trying to hold on to them. In the moment, all of this can feel cruel. You replay every detail. You question your own worth. You wonder what you could have done differently. You feel abandoned by something you trusted completely. But given enough distance, time reveals what the pain alone couldn't explain. You start to see how staying would have kept you trapped in an older, smaller version of yourself. You start to understand that leaving forced a kind of growth you'd been avoiding for a long time. There's one truth that keeps showing up again and again in stories of destined love. When two people are genuinely meant to be together, they're often required to grow apart first. They're separated so the illusions can fall away. They're stripped of the fantasies they held about love, about each other, and about themselves. They're forced to confront their own wounds, their fears, their unhealthy habits, and the ways they've been avoiding responsibility for their own healing. This period isn't a punishment for past mistakes or for loving too much or too little in the past. It's a sacred stretch of time, a space life itself carves out, where you're gently reshaped. During this window, each person is refined, like gold going through fire, into a steadier, more authentic version of who they were always meant to become. This is where you learn the lessons that can't be rushed or handed to you secondhand. You learn boundaries, not as walls meant to shut people out, but as signposts that protect your energy and honor your worth. You learn self-respect, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else's validation, but rises instead from a quiet understanding of who you are underneath everything. You learn how to love deeply and genuinely without losing your own identity in the process. You learn that being chosen by someone else means nothing if you haven't already chosen yourself first, and that your sense of wholeness has to come from within, not from someone else's approval. Only once this inner work has actually started does destiny begin to reveal what's next. Sometimes that path circles back to reunion. Two people meeting again with their hearts cleared of illusion, standing on far stronger ground than before. Sometimes it leads somewhere else entirely, redirecting each person towards something that fits more naturally with where they've grown. Either way, no one walks away from this unchanged. Something essential shifts inside, subtle at first, but powerful over time. The person you were at the beginning of this journey simply won't exist in quite the same way again. If you're reading this with someone specific in mind, let these words settle in gently. You don't need to chase anything, force anything, or prove anything. Real destiny never wears you down. It never asks you to shrink yourself, compromise who you are, or live in constant anxiety. What's genuinely meant for you won't arrive wrapped in confusion or fear. It will feel safe, natural, and right, even in its simplicity. It will never make you doubt your worth. It won't ask you to silence yourself, and it won't expect you to settle for less than you deserve. All it will ever ask for is growth, honesty, and courage, the kind that comes from truly meeting yourself, even when that's uncomfortable. And if that person never comes back, don't let that feel like failure. Don't let your heart measure its worth by permanence or presence alone. The connection was never a test of how long it would last. It was a teacher. It served its purpose, shaping you, guiding you, strengthening you for whatever comes next. It prepared you to recognize love in its truth rather than its illusion. Destined connections were never about possession, certainty, or guarantees. They're about transformation. They show up exactly when you're ready, or exactly when you need to be made ready. They disturb your comfort just enough to reveal your blind spots. They challenge the beliefs you've outgrown to make space for healthier, truer ones. They may leave pain behind them, but they also leave clarity, insight, and a quiet certainty that every moment carried meaning. Nothing about it was wasted, not the tears, not the longing, not the heartbreak, not the disappointment. What feels like loss often turns out to be alignment in disguise. What feels like rejection often steers you toward something truer. What feels like an ending is frequently just the doorway into a deeper, more lasting relationship with yourself. Destiny doesn't rush, and it doesn't explain itself on your timeline. It won't bend to your impatience. It asks for patience when you're desperate for answers, and it asks for trust when uncertainty feels heavy on your shoulders. Looking back, you'll see just how carefully and relentlessly it was guiding you the entire time, even through the moments that hurt the most, even through the nights that felt like they'd never end.